Well, welcome back to the Marriage Sessions. A special welcome if you've just joined us. Last week, we looked at the subject of cherish, how we can stop that creeping separateness and things that we can do to keep love alive. And maybe you've already tried to put some of those things into practice. This week, we're looking at the subject of connect, how we can communicate well, how we can understand and accept each other and connect well together. The sessions are about an hour long with questions that you can work through together. Do make time for those questions. Many couples find that that's one of the most valuable parts of the evening. And if difficult things do come up, remember that we've sent you a link which gives a page where you can access further support. So make sure that you're comfy, the little children are in bed, teenagers are in another room, and enjoy.
Oh no, I remember this from school.
I see a French woman.
She looks about 70.
I see like an old woman.
I see totally different.
I can't see the old woman actually.
A young lady, I think.
Oh, okay, I see what you're seeing now.
Doesn't look anywhere near 70.
Well, you can see a witch and a very glamorous lady.
That's strange, isn't it?
Do you think it's good to be different?
We're totally different in our sort of interests.
Opposites attract.
Don't have to be the same as the person that you live with.
It can work either way, because we have a number of similarities and yet a number of differences.
He's grumpy.
Yeah, I am. I'm definitely a pessimist.
Yeah, I'm more of an optimist.
She loves gardening, I don't like
He
gardening.
doesn't.
I like aeroplanes, she doesn't
I
like
don't.
aeroplanes.
I'm more sociable.
Yeah,
You're not.
It's a bit like electricity, positive and negative.
Few arguments is quite healthy.
Yeah.
If you disagree about things and you have different points of view and do different things in life, then you've always got conversation. I mean, that is one of the great things in marriage, I think, is to keep talking to each other and keep enjoying each other's company.
We're very different and I think that's stood us in good stead.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm more an organiser.
And I do, I'm told.
Let's be honest, in our relationships we don't always see eye to eye. Sometimes our partner can feel like a complete stranger to us. You might end up feeling, I don't get him, I don't understand her anymore, or even, what happened to the person I first fell in love with? This is completely normal. We all face times we struggle to connect with each other. So the question is this: how do we overcome the differences between us and better understand one another? How do we stay connected?
I'm an extrovert.
I'm an introvert.
I am very expressive.
And I'm not very expressive.
I'm very tidy.
I'm quite messy.
I love rom-coms.
I love Braveheart.
I love quite bland food.
I like extremely spicy, hot, chili-based food.
I love planning.
And I love to be very spontaneous. It's
I
just
like
our
to-
personalities, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you've got a very expressive personality, Becky. If she likes something, the whole street will know she's happy. And this is a hard thing for me. I've had to accept that Becky needs to have people over. That's a difficult thing for me because I was brought up in a family background, whereas our castle is our castle and no one enters, you know.
You've got better, and you know he will have people around for dinner. It's not that you don't ever want anybody round, but naturally your way of relaxing, way of, you know, enjoying an evening would be just the two of us sitting watching the telly.
We met in a nightclub, and I got introduced to Becky by one of her friends.
He looked quite hot in my opinion, so I was happy to give him my number.
I just felt like there was something there.
There was like an instant connection, really, wasn't there?
Yeah,
There was.
I felt like, wow, I've met somebody here. I've just met somebody. I've really met somebody. So
because it was only the next day, wasn't it, that we went on a date, came to pick me up. Literally after that date, you said, didn't you, to your sister, you went home and said to your sister, I think I've just met the girl I'm going to marry. A year later then, exactly a year later to the day we met, we got married.
Everything seemed to be going really well for the first year. It was almost too good to be true in many ways. And then the honeymoon period seemed to just fade out. And suddenly, in the first year, I realised that being real with Becky was something I hadn't really been done, because I'd had a drink problem, and found it hard to share that with her, thinking probably she'd be, she'd reject me or she'd find it difficult to cope with. So I tried to keep it hidden for quite a while, but then it just had to come out in the end, because I realised that I couldn't carry this burden and problem on my own. So the first year of marriage was one of the hardest years.
It was some hard times, and kind of me realising really actually what it really meant to stick with somebody when times got tough, and when they were going through something that I didn't really understand. I didn't really get it.
And I think that you found that tough, didn't you?
Yeah.
I think you wanted to help, and you wanted to, but you just didn't quite understand me, and I felt like I didn't understand you. So we hit a conflict in our lives.
And we knew we loved each other. We knew that hadn't gone away. And we knew we had a connection within that, but it was actually, life isn't always easy, and you know there was these issues that we were going to have to work through if we wanted this to work, wasn't it?
After we'd worked it all out and talked it through, I decided to go into rehab, and Becky stuck with me through that, and we got to know each other, and in a way like I think we meant to, really. Becky accepted me, and she didn't reject me, and she worked with me through my problems. So when I came out of rehab, I was a new guy. I was a completely changed man, and I felt like our marriage had turned a corner, and I'd become stronger. And it set us up really for the following 9 years. And that foundation is based on honesty and trust. Being different is something you embrace rather than you reject. And yeah, it's just made me much more of an understanding and accepting person.
I really look forward to growing old with Phil. I'm looking forward, I love it when you see those old couples sitting together and having coffee and watching life go by, and that's what I really hope that we'll have together in the future, and all the things in between, watching our children grow up, and just doing life together, having that friend in my life that will always be there no matter what, and we'll shed tears together, laugh together, just do life together, and I look forward to that.
So Will, in your work with couples, helping them build strong relationships, you often talk about couples being connected. What do you mean by that?
Well, connection is really important for a healthy and happy relationship over the long haul. So I talk about two sorts of connection. There's the active part of connection, if you like, the doing bit, and then there's the feelings part of connection, the being bit. And so we tend to find that when people invest heavily in the activity of connecting, they feel strongly connected. So you might think about an activity of connection like going for a bike ride or having a nice meal together. That investment changes the way you then feel together. A strong relationship is a connected relationship.
Okay, so why is it so important that couples are connected?
Well, being connected is an essential part of a healthy relationship. And the health of the relationship is ultimately about the sense of intimacy, the sense of connectedness and togetherness, and that comes through this idea of having shared openly, having really sensed that together we are a unit, we've become, we are one, we're not diverted from one another, we're not sort of segregated from each other. And so connectedness is the sort of essence of happiness. Even when times are hard, the couple can feel strongly connected and work through that together and feel content because they know they're on the same page.
And so what about when there's a disconnection between couples? What's going on there?
So when there's disconnection, nearly always what's happened is there hasn't been that active investment, that intentional investment in spending time. And so two people's stories, if you like, segment. And one person's got one story, one narrative, the other person's got another story. And those stories haven't been shared. So increasingly, both partners feel like their partner doesn't know about them or about their story, about their needs, their problems, their challenges, and so they start feeling insulated against their partner. Now, what happens in their emotional world is rather than just feeling neutral about that separation, they start feeling hostile. So normally irritability is the first thing that is noticeable in a relationship where there is that sort of separation, where people feel disconnected. And irritability gives way to anger, which often leads to arguments. And the arguments are often forged around what's not known rather than what is known. And you hear phrases like, oh, you never listen to me anymore, you never spend any time with me, or you're always on your phone, or when are you going to invest some time in the children, or why are you always talking to your mum? They're sort of accusatory, you always or you never, nearly always come into the dialogue. Unified couples who feel strongly connected don't have that same narrative because actually they're on the same page. So they might disagree, but they're not making sort of accusatory claims against one another.
So Will, some couples maybe might feel after a while they don't feel as attracted to each other maybe as they once were. So what's the relationship between attraction and connection?
The key thing is that attraction and connection are both essential for the relationship. But as you say, some couples worry that they don't feel like they did in the first year of marriage, and I'd say that's completely normal. It doesn't mean that the attraction has left the relationship. The attraction just gets buried by other things. It's amazing when you scrape back the sand and the dust, you can find some incredible gold, and couples kind of say, oh, you know what, I thought we'd lost it, but when we kind of got rid of all the dross, I found this beautiful person that I'd married and I couldn't believe it. And now our relationship is red hot again. We've got really close again. And it was here all the time. It just needed to be dusted off. It needed to be uncovered again. So I'd say building for connection nearly always reveals attraction.
Brilliant. Will, thank you so much. That's been really helpful.
Isn't it interesting? The differences between us can be both positive and negative. What makes us interested in each other and attracted to each other can also, let's face it, irritate us and drive us to distraction. The challenge in any marriage is to keep on understanding each other and finding ways to celebrate the differences between us.
I think we're quite similar. I think we've got more similarities than differences in character.
Every way possible we are different from each other. It'd be easier for me to name the few ways we are similar.
Differences, it's not that many between us, is there?
No. I'm spontaneous.
I need everything planned.
I'm very logical.
I'm incredibly emotional.
I mean, differences, Matt is much more laid back than me. That is the biggest difference and the thing we'll argue about. So Matt's timing will always be to the minute, whereas I'm a planner. I'm the boring one, the planner who'll get stuff done.
I am so in tune with other people's emotions.
I have no idea what's happening with other people's emotions most of the time.
You don't.
Most of our default personality traits are very similar.
Mm-hmm. I love sports.
I do not love sports. I love chocolate.
Some people would say you need a few sparks to, bump off each other and this, that and the other, whereas we love it, don't we? We love being very similar in who we are now. Yeah.
There's a spice in our marriage because of the differences.
I like
and then,
spice.
Which is great. And then the downside is there's constantly a spice in our marriage because of the differences. Do you know what I mean?
If I'm worried about something, I'll talk about it all the time. If Gem's worried, she'll sleep.
I'm an optimist. And so I would always be like, well, we'll find a way. Like, it'll be okay. I'm sure there's probably 10 options and one of them will work for us. So
I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, but a realist.
We complement each other really well, I think.
Yeah,
I think the fact that we're different, but also that we understand that and kind of have spent a lot of time working together and talking openly and honestly. I find this hard. You don't find it hard, but actually I do. And working out how in different situations we can kind of help each other in that.
I think we've learned to enjoy the mundane things, and we're quite similar in that we can find the same things funny.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was so attracted to Andrew's just confidence about life. Here I am. I'm like, I don't know, should I? I'm not sure. Andrew's just like, this is the way to go, and we're going this way, and it's all gonna be fine. I know the destination. I have since learned that a lot of times he doesn't know the destination, even when he thinks he does, but it's nice. It was incredibly attractive. I still find it incredibly attractive, except for when I don't, and it's annoying. And it's like this thing of, it's hard to convince you that your way isn't the right way, isn't it? Well, it's hard for me too, anyway.
Yeah, it's hard for you.
But like I say, to begin with, I was like, oh, that's amazing. Hannah knows so many people. I love that fact. Yeah, I can get to know lots of people that sort of she knows. She hung out with quite a few cool people. But like I say, now it's a bit like, oh, not another new person.
You find it annoying when I talk when the telly's on.
Yeah.
And I think when we first met, you wouldn't have found that annoying because you were really genuinely interested in everything I said.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, you're
When there's that
actually, you
program
need
on
to
that
be
I really
quiet.
want to watch, that I've been waiting to see for a while, and then you're talking to me.
Yeah.
I think it works well for us that we're different. It can be quite irritating sometimes, though.
At times.
At times.
From the basics of skin colour to the intricacies of personality type, we could not be more different.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
All across the world, I've asked people this question: what is the greatest gift we can give another person? And all across the world, people answer in the same way: love. Love is the greatest gift. I'm sure they're right. But there's another gift. And if this gift is not given, a person will never believe they are loved. It is the gift of acceptance. Nobody sums this up for me like Richard Seltzer. Seltzer was a surgeon, and he talks about an occasion just after an operation. He says, I stand by a bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish. To remove a tumor in her cheek, I have cut the nerve. It has left her mouth twisted. It will be thus from now on. He says, I promise you with religious fervor, I have followed the curve of her flesh. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor, I have cut the nerve. I watch her and her husband dwell in the evening lamplight of the ward. I ask myself, who are this couple who touch each other so generously, so greedily? The young woman looks up. She says, will my mouth always be like this? I say, yes, I'm sorry. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. He says, I like it. It's kind of cute. And he bends to kiss her crooked mouth. And I so close, I can see he's changing the shape of his lips to prove their kiss still works. And I remember that in ancient times the gods appeared as men. And I hold my breath and let the wonder in. That young man wasn't a god, but he was saying something like this to himself. When I married you, you were beautiful, and I would that you look the same now, but I will love you. Do you know there'll come a time in many marriages where, at least for a time, our partner will seem unattractive to us, physically, emotionally, intellectually. And at that time, we don't feel quite as much in love. We have to love not just with our heart, but with our will. We have, at least for a time, to change the shape of our lips to prove the kiss still works. Acceptance is important, but it's also right that we can sometimes hope or even ask for change in our partner. But there are some important principles. And the first one is this: sometimes it is right to let our partner know how we feel they should change. You know, sometimes when a marriage goes through a rocky patch, we just want to put our head in the sand. We think, I better not say anything, but that's not a great strategy. Our partner has a right to know how we feel that they should change. A friend of mine's a marriage counselor, and some time ago he was talking to a couple who'd been married for 15 years, they're about to divorce. And he said to the woman, why are you leaving your husband? Because when he does these things, I hate it. It annoys me so much. Have you ever told him that? No, I've never told him that. He turned to the man. Did you know when you do these things, it so annoys your wife? No, I didn't know that. They'd been married for 15 years. They were about to break up. And not even the most basic level of communication to each other where they felt they should each change. Secondly, we have to accept what we can't change. You know, sometimes we have this idea that we want our partner to be perfect. We have this ideal. But the problem with that is this. When we try to make our partner be somebody they can't be, we often miss the incredible person they are. And often it's not until a relationship is over we look back and think, you know, they had wonderful qualities and I just took them for granted. And thirdly, when we can't change somebody else, we can't change ourselves. Sometimes we're in a marriage and we think there's no hope for this marriage, nothing will ever change, but we can change. And because change is dynamic, when we change, sometimes other people change as well. It reminds me of two men who were chatting in a pub, and one said to the other one, you know, I wish my Sally were more like your Claire. The other one said, excuse me? He said, I wish my Sally were more like your Claire. He said, I've spent the last 10 years wishing my Claire were more like your Sally. And he said to me afterwards, from that moment, I saw my wife in a new light. I began to appreciate her in a new way. She was the same, but I changed. And then lastly, we have to allow for change. During the course of a marriage, we do change physically, emotionally, spiritually, and we have to allow for that. Somebody once said that women marry men with a silly idea they'll be able to change them, and men marry women with a foolish notion that they'll be the same forever. Of course, what we're really talking about is love, deep love, and acceptance. Altering the shape of our lips to prove the kiss still works.
Connection isn't possible without effective communication. Whatever your starting point, we can all learn to communicate better. Good communication is vital. In fact, it's the lifeblood of every relationship.
I remember many years ago talking to a couple who were about to divorce. And the husband said to me, you know what, Rob, the funny thing is, in many ways we still love each other. It's just that over the years, and then he used this phrase I've never been able to get out of my mind, there's been a creeping separateness. A creeping separateness. You know, sometimes a marriage will break up almost overnight, perhaps something big like the affair, but often it's not like that. It's the day by day and week by week and month by month, and down the years, a couple simply grow apart. And so often that's because of lack of communication. It's not this couple aren't speaking to each other. They speak about whether they should change the washing machine or how the kids are doing at school, but they've stopped letting each other know how they really feel. That was summed up for me powerfully in a letter I got some years ago. Andy and I were so in love when we got married. It was nothing for us in those early days to sit and talk for hours. It's hard to know when we really grew apart. Andy's job became more and more demanding. I had the children to see to. Perhaps I gave them too much attention, but I honestly feel if I hadn't been speaking to them, I wouldn't have been speaking to anybody. He came home so tired, he could hardly say hello, let alone tell me about his day or pretend to be interested in mine. I hated it. I longed to speak to him. Sometimes after we'd made love, I would for a moment believe he felt close to me. And as we lay there, I'd begin to tell him so much of what I'd been longing to say, but often as I shared my heart, I realized he was already asleep. And then a strange thing happened. I learned to live without him. Oh, I washed his clothes, I cooked, I tried hard to be a wife to him, but inside I learned to live apart from him. It was as if something inside said, you're on your own now. For your sake and the kids, face it, learn to live with it. And then I eventually realized I didn't love him anymore. The voice I'd longed to hear, I now hated. He must have sensed that because, incredibly, he wanted to talk. But it was too late. It was over. Professor Philip Zimbardo of Stanford University said, I know of no more potent killer than isolation, the isolation of you from me. And that isolation often occurs in a marriage where one of the partners becomes so absorbed in their own life, they lose the willingness or even the ability to communicate with the other. And when we've lost that communication, it's hard to find it again. It's almost like learning to play the piano again, to learn to communicate. We say, well, the guy said we should communicate, let's try. Okay, well, should we have the television down or should we turn it off? Well, just turn it down for now. Okay, well, what do you want to talk about? No, you go first. Okay, I'd like to talk about your mother. No, I don't want to talk about my mother. And then we start to row. But you know, that's not a big deal. The big problem in some marriages is not they row too much, they don't row enough. There is instead what that man called that creeping separateness. And you know, if we're going to begin to learn to communicate, most of us would do well to begin with a very simple lesson, the simple lesson of learning to listen. Have you heard of the little girl who wanted to read her dad a story? He said, Daddy, listen to me while I read a story to you. But his head was sunk in the sports page of the newspaper. He said, I am listening. Silly, Daddy, she said. Don't you know you have to listen with your eyes as well? And that little girl was right. There is no greater dignity you can pay another person than to look in their eyes when they're speaking to you. Not at the television behind them or the person over there, just them. Watch great listeners. Great listeners don't interrupt. Great listeners don't finish sentences for other people. Great listeners don't look at their watch as you're talking to them. Great listeners don't take phone calls in the middle of conversations, because that gives the message, this phone call is more important than you. We can rediscover communication in a marriage, even if we've lost it for many years. But for most of us, it's an ongoing battle. Do you know, I remember getting back home after running a marriage seminar. It was a long way from our house, and I didn't get in until the early hours of the morning. So as not to wake my wife, Diane, I slipped into the guest bedroom. There was a note waiting for me on the pillow. Darling, I hope tonight went well. I've been thinking about you, but we haven't talked much together recently, and I'm missing it. I just told a couple of hundred people how to be great communicators, and here's my own wife saying to me, darling, let's keep practicing what we're preaching. Ah, well, they say confession is good for the soul.
Well, I think one of the topics we find hardest to talk about probably is money.
What was a valid spend and what wasn't?
Just is the one that I know when I say to Johnny, we need to talk about it, that he will instinctively react.
30 quid on makeup and boots is a novelty, not a necessity, but we disagree and we've dealt with it.
Occasionally you might step into a conversation and then realise you've started it either at the wrong place or at the wrong time.
I suppose I avoid it until I know really I need to have this conversation.
I don't think we have any trouble communicating about anything, do we?
No, at all.
The hardest problem is getting you to communicate, yes.
You used to say when we first met that I was quite a closed book. I think you actually said cold or stone-hearted at one point.
Yeah.
Not a good thing to say on
It
a
was
date.
true at the time, though.
Well, it was, yeah.
You're getting there.
Yeah, I'm getting there, I'm learning.
And you're remembering as well that I don't know what goes on inside your head. I think that's taken you a few years to realise that I don't know, unless you say it, verbalise it, I don't know what's going on.
We come from such different backgrounds.
And what's normal for family and extended family. And I think that was years worth of hard conversations, wasn't it?
But I think that it used to be a case of you interrupting.
Just had to do that.
He doesn't get irritated that often as a person, but he really winds him up the wrong way if I've cut him off. And I've also, in cutting him off, assumed he was going to say something that actually wasn't what he was going to say in the first place. Johnny
fixes things. Bad habits for Johnny. He fixes everything. So if I'm just trying to talk something through to get it sorted in my head and a framework, Johnny will be straight in to fix it and the solution will come.
Especially when we were both working, if I came home with a problem from work and just wanted to talk about it, then he'd keep telling me what to do.
When you've had like a toddler all day that hasn't listened to you and then your husband doesn't listen to you either, it is a surefire way to get me slightly cross.
I can remember one time when she phoned me up and she had something important to say to me, and halfway through the conversation she said, "Tim, can I just ask, are you watching football?" And I had to admit that I was. Let's turn everything off, let's switch phones off and stuff if we really want to sort of discuss something that's important. Otherwise, like I say, there's a million and one different distractions that come in the way.
I think another bad habit for me is not realizing when I need to gracefully bow out of an argument to revisit it.
I can almost predict that she'll walk out of the room and I'll wait a few minutes and I think to myself, she's coming back. You'll gather your thoughts. And then the door opens and we're back into it with sort of round two and then maybe out again. And you're never quite sure when the bell is going to be rung.
Are we finished?
Are we finished?
Most of us find it easy to talk about everyday things. But in our marriages, we need to talk about the deeper issues, our hopes and dreams, our fears, and maybe even our past hurts. This can be difficult to do. It requires courage, a sense of togetherness, and a willingness to be vulnerable with each other.
So Sarah, we've been looking at the theme of connect, and in your work coaching couples, what would you say is the key for couples to build a strong relationship?
Well, interestingly enough, I would say that it is a deep connection. Often when we first get together as a couple, we have that attraction, we have those feel-good hormones flying around, that dopamine, that oxytocin that make us feel really good. And between 18 months to 2 years, those sort of hormones, that sort of initial infatuation starts to fade and we take off those rose-tinted glasses. And as that starts to happen, we can replace that with a sort of deeper, more real connection, perhaps a more authentic connection where we're really relating to each other for who we really are and not for who we think the other person should be or we'd like to imagine that they are in our fantasy, but for who they really are, and we allow them to change, to develop, and we continue to get to know them and like them through the duration of a relationship.
Okay, so in a marriage, practically, what does that look like?
Well, I think it's going to involve a certain degree of vulnerability. Now, the word vulnerability can send some of us running for the hills. I know for myself, historically, I found it really, really hard to be vulnerable, to talk about emotional things, to talk about deep fears, to talk about anything really that was going on inside of me. But vulnerability is such an amazing gift that we can offer our partner. Our marriage, our relationship can be that place where we can be really seen and known and understood, and where we can really help our partner to be seen and known and understood, where we can be ourselves in that safe context. And so vulnerability is really important in being able to build that into a relationship.
And so what does it look like, in sort of really practical terms, what does it look like to be vulnerable together in a marriage?
Well, I think for some people it can look like something really scary. For some of us, we can think it looks like the equivalent of running through a supermarket absolutely stark naked. And we're like, that's not something I would want to do. It's not about getting physically naked, but it is about getting emotionally naked. And for some of us, that can be a frightening prospect. Perhaps in the past, we found it difficult in relationships, perhaps we've been hurt, we found reasons why we've needed to build defenses and protection. But in a relationship, being vulnerable is about saying, this is who I am on the inside, and I'm going to trust you with who I really am. And it's creating a safe place so that the other person can do the same. And that means being able to express not just the things of everyday life, like who's picking up the kids and what are we going to eat for supper, but actually, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm afraid of, this is what my fears are, this is what my hopes are, this is what my dreams are. We can get so used to in our life having to project these good images, these positive images, these images of success and doing well. Our marriage is a place where we can take a deep breath and be who we really are and express what is really going on inside.
And that sounds wonderful, but I imagine for some of us that sounds quite a hard thing to do. I imagine there are many marriages where maybe both of us, but certainly one of us finds that difficult. So what advice would you give to them?
So I know for me, in my own marriage, that was something I found very difficult. And I think it's about building trust with each other. So for the person who doesn't find it so difficult, who perhaps is much more of a natural expresser of their feelings, we all feel feelings, but it's how are we able to express them? And for the person who finds it easier to talk about feelings, I would say be gentle with your partner, create a safe environment, be curious with them, ask them questions to draw out their feelings. And if you are the person, like me, who would really struggle to express yourself, it's about taking a step, a small step to risk showing the other person a little bit about who you are inside. And it's like developing a muscle. It takes time and practice, but as you start to do it, it gets easier. It does.
And if we can even begin to do that in our relationships, what difference will it make to our marriage?
Well, it makes an amazing difference. I think when people have looked at marriages that have been successful against ones that haven't, relationships where couples have really turned towards each other and been vulnerable and have worked on that area of relationship and built an amazing sort of deposit of good connections, of goodwill, that creates a resilience in your relationship. That means when hard times come, as they often will in a relationship, or when we get things wrong with each other, as we often will, because none of us have a perfect relationship, it means that you've got that deposit, that big deposit of goodwill to draw on, and hopefully you're not going to have a sort of empty bank.
Sarah, that is brilliant. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, thank you.
So let's set ourselves this challenge: to better understand and accept our partner, to celebrate and embrace the differences between us, and communicate in a truly open and honest way.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this session as we've looked at the different ways that we can understand each other and communicate so that we build that deeper connection in our relationship. And I really hope that you find that there was something from this session that you'll be able to begin to put into practice in the week ahead that will make a difference to your marriage for years to come. And don't forget, if you need further support, do give us a call or take a look at the further support page. The link for that will be on the email with the details of this session. So we're almost at the end of our time together, but we want to let you know that as well as supporting marriages, we can offer you help and support in all the different areas of family life. We have support for parents, for those with children with additional needs, for single parents and the bereaved, particularly those who have lost a child or a partner early in life. So do take a look at our website and just see if there is any way we can come alongside and support you. But before we end, I'd like to show you a really short video explaining a little bit more about our work, and you'll see how you could support us if you're able. We've put together a special pack of resources as a thank you, including my latest book, If You Forget Everything Else, Remember This, Building a Great Marriage. It covers lots of areas of marriage that we haven't had time to cover in the marriage sessions, and there are some great cartoons. So we'll head to the video now, but thank you so much for joining us. I really hope that you enjoyed this evening's session. At Care for the Family, we come alongside families in all their different situations. And the current crisis means those families need our support more than ever before. So I wonder if you can help us by becoming a partner today, by simply giving a small amount of money each month. And as our personal thank you, we'd love to send you our special partner pack. It's full of really great resources to help you in the ups and downs of family life. If you're already a partner, we are so grateful. But I wonder if you might consider increasing your giving just a little each month. And if so, I'd love to send our partner pack to you as well as our thank you. To become a partner or to increase, you simply go to cff.org.uk/DD. Your gift, however small, will make a real difference to a family in this current crisis. Thank you so very much.